Welcome back, my friends. Today on the channel, we're going to do the monthly question and answer video. Once a month on the Posts tab, my YouTube channel, I'll put out a question prompt such as this one. Down below, you can ask me anything about anything. Read each other's questions, and then thumbs up the ones you want me to respond to. The cutoff for today's video is 60 thumbs up. Thank you so much to everyone who left a question or read each other's questions. We got some good ones today. So the top ranked question was from VIP Starism. This is what this person asks. With Russia bringing in troops from North Korea, why isn't Europe sending in 30 or 50,000 troops to support the backlines in Ukraine? Surely they could even man the Belarus border so as to free up more Ukrainian troops to the eastern side of the country. Why don't we even hear about this as a discussion? First thing I should say is, as an American, it's not really my place to criticize Europe when the United States is not sending troops, but one could argue the threat level is different. And this debate, I think, is more interesting now because the government of North Korea is officially sending their military to attack Europe. North Korea already has sent about 10,000 troops, and Kim Jong-un has now announced another 30,000 are on the way. Russia is trying to say that these North Koreans were only there to help Russia defend itself in Kursk, and these 30,000 North Korean troops will just be placed on the border to free up Russian troops to then attack somewhere inside Ukraine, but I don't believe that. I think these North Korean troops will be used in the occupied territories for meat assaults. With that said, why doesn't Europe send their militaries to maybe guard the Belarusian border or guard the border with Transnistria? And they can. It's a great option. I would support it, but this is the individual choice of any country. Right now, Sweden has this choice. Denmark has this choice. Poland has this choice. And the democratic leaders of all these countries are choosing not to. Kim Jong-un doesn't care. He's a dictator. If all 30,000 of these troops die, he doesn't have to worry about his next election. But for the Chancellor of Germany, for the Prime Minister of the UK, or the President of France, they have to worry about their next election. And this would be exploited by the far right. All of these far-right parties that are trying to gain majorities, if French or German or British troops were dying in Ukraine, they would be extremely critical. And I do think this would upset the democratic balance in these countries. Beyond that, what is deterring these democratic leaders in Europe, and especially now with the election of Trump, I don't think they believe they have a credible nuclear deterrent anymore. This is called the Single Integrated Operation Plan. This is the PSYOP. But this is basically the plan if NATO and Russia were to go to nuclear war. I can link these videos down below showing, what would happen. And this is what I did in the Air Force, guys. If we zoom in to the beginning of this video, these are the missile fields in North Dakota. This is Minot, where I was stationed. This is F.E. Warren. This is Malmstrom. You can see if everything was launched, we know where they're headed. Because there's only 2 nations in the world that have this many nuclear weapons. Since the Cold War ended, for over 30 years, the United States has been engaging in bilateral relations with the Russians to get them to reduce their nuclear stockpiles. Here's the current estimates. How many warheads does Russia have? And it's 5,449. This is down from when the Kremlin controlled over 30,000, so this is progress. But the United States has 5,277, and we only maintain such a large stockpile to deter Russia from attacking us or attacking anyone else. Apparently, this was always their plan for the last 30 years. But when you go down, other countries that have a nuclear deterrent, China 600, France 290, the UK 225, If Donald Trump is not a reliable partner, if Article 5 does not hold, if Russia were to use a nuclear weapon against a NATO country, and the United States under Trump said, "You're on your own," our 5,000 nuclear warheads are not leaving their silos. This is very concerning for Germany, which doesn't have any nuclear weapons. Same with Poland, same with Finland, same with the Baltics. And the existing nuclear deterrence from France and the UK is not that good. It's not that many. I don't think France or the UK have hardened silos or road mobiles. They mostly just have their nuclear submarines and then maybe some nuclear-capable planes. It's just, frankly, not enough. So when Solyov on Kremlin State TV threatens to nuke people, this does work. This does influence the debate. The Kremlin is careful not to put out any statements, though Medvedev is always drunk. But on Kremlin State TV, this is their job, to ratchet up the rhetoric, to intimidate and scare whoever they think they can scare. And it does work. Not a great answer. I think Poland or Denmark or whoever should be sending their military to help Ukraine and just guard the Belarusian border or guard the border with Transnistria. But this is a debate that Ukraine has to have with these countries one-on-one if they want to send their troops. We might get there by the end of this year, honestly. Next comment is from Penny Lane. Jake, I don't have a question. I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciate you and your support of Ukraine. Thank you so much, Penny Lane. I really appreciate you. If you guys want to do me a huge favor, if you go to my YouTube channel and click on links, you can see all of my social media. If you're not already following me on any of these platforms, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Twitter, TikTok, or Spotify, even if you don't use these platforms anymore and you just have an account, go subscribe, go follow me. I need to increase my follower count on these other platforms in order to get more people to watch my YouTube videos, which then supports and raises awareness for Ukraine. So if you guys want to go to my YouTube channel, click on links, and then just subscribe to things, I do appreciate it. I need to get my subscriber counts up. Next question. If the Russian economy collapses, what would be the next phase of the war for Ukraine? That's a good question. Everybody checks the daily price of ICE Brent crude. The Urals always trades at a discount. And this is a downward trending slope. If you were to look at the 200-day moving average over the last 3 years, it's going down. And I don't think the global economy is going to snap out of this recession anytime soon. Donald Trump placing 30%, 50%, 80% tariffs on countries, this is destroying globalization. You could argue there are positives to doing this, that's fine. But in the short term, there's going to be some economic pain. And Russia is the least prepared country in the world right now for a global economic slowdown. So this question, how is Russia's economy doing? And the indications are everywhere. Russia sells off more foreign currency from the wealth fund to bridge the budget gap. An example of a prosperous country that took an authoritative turn and now their economy is collapsing, we have a real-world example. It's Venezuela. Venezuela, if you went back 30 years, was the wealthiest and most educated country in South America. Venezuela was doing great. And then Hugo Chavez, a dictator, took control of the country and ran it into the ground. Venezuela is now almost a failed state. And this is what's going to happen to Russia. If the Russian economy collapses, anybody who can get out is going to leave the country. So this shows the population of Venezuela steadily increasing over time. The population then peaked in 2016 when Hugo Chavez, this was about the time that Maduro took control of the country. And with authoritarians who are corrupt and want to stay in power forever, they're not good for capitalist markets. They're oppressive. They don't respect property rights. They don't respect innovation or patents. So the population of Venezuela is declining. There are millions of people either going to other Spanish-speaking countries or they're trying to get to the United States. They're trying to claim asylum. And these aren't mostly poor people. Mostly, they're educated people. They're doctors, lawyers, businessmen, people with language skills. And they're trying to leave the country for a better life. Usually, when countries go on this downward path, it's the poor and the brainwashed who remain. And this is fascinating for me the last 3.5 years to watch these Russian YouTubers. This is Roman from NFKRZ. He originally fled to Georgia, but he's now resettled in Portugal. This is Niki Proshin. He was from St. Petersburg, and he spent some time in Thailand, and I think he's in China now, but he's avoiding Russia because he doesn't want to die in this war. Here's Zach the Russian. He also fled to Georgia and then eventually got a student visa, and he's now a university student here in the United States. This is Natasha's Adventures. She's a woman. She's not going to get conscripted, but she also has chosen to flee the country. And then I think most people are familiar with Konstantin from inside Russia. He's in one of the Central Asian republics hiding out. But this is what happens when an authoritarian takes over a country and then the country starts to economically collapse. Anybody with talent, anybody with language skills or the ability to work in other countries, they get out and they get their families out. And that is what is awaiting Russia's future. But when the economic collapse happens, there's a lot of Russians that won't feel any different because they're currently living in poverty. Indoor plumbing still a pipe dream for 20% of Russian households. 1 out of every 5 Russians today poops in their backyard. They have an outhouse. They do not have running water or a sanitation system. So if Russia economically collapses, the daily lives of about, what's 20% of 140? That's 14 million Russians. They're not going to really feel any different, and they're not going to go anywhere. They're just going to be poor and try to survive in place. But if we get the economic collapse, if the Russian soldiers in the occupied territories stop getting paid, or if what they're paid can barely even buy food for their families back home, then the soldiers are going to stop fighting. And Ukraine then will get their territory back. I think that's the scenario we're likely headed towards, but it's going to take some more time. Next question from Awesome HPT. Do you find it puzzling how in the Russian army there hasn't been a large-scale mutiny? Considering how the average Russian soldier is treated, you'd think it would have happened by now. Yes, there was the Wagner mutiny, but that was mostly a power struggle between Shoigu and Prigozhin. There are reports like this all the time. Russian soldier runs over his own commander with a tank in protest. So this is happening all the time, fratricide. There are Russians killing other Russians because they're arguing over money, or they don't want to die in a meat assault, or they're mad their buddy was killed, or whatever. It's a war zone. But you're right, there's not been a large-scale coordinated mutiny because Russians make very good slaves, and they all have this slave mindset to the Tsar. Putin tells them that victory is in their genes, passed down from one generation to a next, because the Russians defeated the mighty Napoleon and defeated Hitler. They're special. So these guys, that's all they have, is their Russian identity, what they've been told by their elders, that they are born winners, they are special. And that's enough to keep them from revolting in mass. Beyond that, though, there is a distinction in the Russian military between contract soldiers and conscripts and then officers. The officer corps of the Russian military, it's about 23%. These are the wealthy, well-connected, privileged, educated Russians in the military. And Putin is very careful to not piss these guys off. Make sure they're paid well, make sure they're treated well. They're not the ones dying in meat assaults. Those are ethnic minorities from Siberia. So as long as Putin continues not abusing the officer corps, these are the guys in charge. These are the disciplinarians who are torturing and brutalizing their own troops to keep them in line. And it works. But the system is entirely built on corruption. Minister's death spooks Russian elite amid corruption clampdown. This is the transport minister. He committed suicide after it was obvious Putin was going to arrest him. But corruption is how the Russian state continues functioning. Putin would never be able to control these officers unless he's okay with them all engaging in corruption. The entire chain of command, on every level, lieutenants, captains, majors, colonels, they're all stealing from their own troops. They're all mistreating their own troops. They're all stealing from budgets and manipulating contracts and making money disappear. And Putin's okay with this because that's how he buys their loyalty. The definition for what the Russian state is a kleptocracy, where everyone is stealing. Everyone is in on the crime. So if Putin falls, if Putin's government goes down, all of these guys are then susceptible to prosecution because they've all been engaging in corruption and murders and bribery and terrible things. So once you've been corrupted by the system, you have an incentive to keep it going. This is what the officer corps for the Russian military is doing. They're all engaging in crimes. They know that. Putin knows that. And they have an incentive to fight to keep the system in place. So that's why there's not been a large-scale mutiny to this point. But once again, what happens when the money runs out? That's what we're waiting for. How do you see China being stopped in providing equipment and parts to the Russian military by Europe and the United States? You're not going to like this answer, but I don't. I don't see China stopping the supply of critical components to the Russian military. And there's nothing that Europe and the United States can do to stop China because we're China's largest trading partner. This is really depressing to think about, but China's largest trading partner is the European Union, number one, as a bloc. The second largest is the United States. The third and fourth is South Korea and Japan, both democracies. The fifth is Taiwan, the country or territory that China wants to destroy. And then down at number 6 is Russia. Right after it is Australia. But in a democracy, leaders are sensitive to their economy because they don't want to lose their next election. Anybody who tries to sanction China is going to economically hurt themselves. We had an opportunity 3 years ago to provide overwhelming support to Ukraine as a deterrent against Russia's aggression, but because the United States and Europe showed weakness, this has emboldened China. I do think in 2026 or 2027, China is going to invade Taiwan and potentially millions of people could die. When that day comes, will the United States military respond, as we're treaty bound to do? I don't think Donald Trump will. And will the Europeans object? Will the Europeans impose sanctions on China and nuke their own economy? And I don't even think they will. It's not a good answer. This isn't written in stone yet. This is a dark future. We're on the path, but there are still lots of opportunities to avoid this scenario. I'm going to continue fighting every day to prevent this. I vacationed in Taiwan for 2 weeks back in 2012. It's a lovely island. I really enjoy the people there. I don't want to see Taiwan destroyed or absorbed by the communist regime in Beijing. But this is the monster we've built. because of low-cost manufactured goods, cheap shit that we want, here in America to buy at Walmart. We created this juggernaut. We created this monster that is going to threaten their neighbors. What is saving us long-term is that China is in terminal decline. The great leap forward for China's economy the last 30 years has been built on robbing poor people from the countryside and bringing them to the urban centers. And China could only do this for so long because they're running out of people. This is a consequence of the one-child policy, but also COVID. Also, for census purposes, China's been overcounting their own population. What benefits they get from Beijing is dependent on how many children are being born, so regional governors have been lying for a long time about how many people actually live in their cities. But the best estimates that we can get, there's not 1.4 billion people in China anymore, it's much lower. But this number is in terminal decline because when people move to urban cities, they stop having kids. When people get off the farms and move into apartments, nobody's having 6 kids anymore. So China is on a collision course with terminal decline of their population. And China's predicament is worse than Russia. Russia is energy independent and food independent, but China is not. China massively relies on importing energy and importing food. So if globalization breaks down, China actually suffers the most. And China knows this, but Xi still wants military glory for himself, and he's gonna make a move on Taiwan. Why hasn't Moldova eliminated their Transnistria issue, which has been an impediment to accession to EU and NATO? This territory of Transnistria only exists because Russia pays for it to exist. The people of Moldova don't hate the people of Transnistria. They're the same people, basically. And I'm sure they would be happy to have a peaceful reunification so that Moldova could then join the EU and NATO. But Russia is paying militants to not do that. These soldiers in Transnistria, I learned, they're locals. Russia just recruits from the local population, pays them to put on a Russian uniform, and they're the ones preventing this country from reunifying. This is the exact same playbook that Russia repeats to stop a country from joining the EU and NATO, create a military conflict. They did that with Moldova in the 90s. They did that with Georgia in the 2000s. They then did that with Ukraine in the 2010s. To stop these countries from pulling away from the Kremlin, you just start killing people. Just create a frozen conflict that never ends. But when the money runs out, I don't think these locals pretending to be Russian soldiers are actually going to remain loyal to their czar. The money has to stop, and then these people can normalize and reunify with the rest of Moldova. But no, attacking this and killing thousands of them I don't think that's the scenario that Zelensky wants to play out. Once Russia finally gets defeated and Putin is dead or in jail, do you think Western countries should force Russia to massively reduce their nuclear stockpiles by 80 or 90%? This might prevent them from bullying other nearby countries. In return, sanctions can be lifted, and Russia can hopefully start back on the path to democracy. 100% yes. I have said this exact same thing in previous videos. When this war is over, after Russia has lost, when we're dealing with the new government that controls the Kremlin, this is going to be a condition for sanctions being lifted. Russia has to agree to reduce their nuclear stockpile down to a more reasonable number. China has 600. That's enough. That's enough to kill a lot of people. So currently Russia's at 5,500. They have to work with the United States and the European partners to reduce their stockpile to 601. The United States would do this as well. The United States is happy to reduce its nuclear stockpile because we don't use them and we don't need them. The United States can win a conventional war without threatening to nuke people. So yes, I 100% support this. This will happen over the next 5 or 10 years. When Russia loses this war, before relations can be normalized, Russia has to agree to give up 90% of their stockpile. Ideally, it'd be all of it, but I don't think we would ever get them to do that. But they can go down to 600 where China is at. The United States can go down to 559. I don't care. It's not a big deal. Next question. Hi, Jake. What do you think is the best case scenario for the West for Kaliningrad? Can they safely be disarmed without them using a nuclear weapon? Is it best for them to become independent or be absorbed by a neighboring country? Or be an international NATO base? How hostile do you think the locals are? Kaliningrad is basically an unsinkable aircraft carrier in the heart of Europe. Kaliningrad only exists as a Russian military outpost to threaten the rest of Europe. So this has to go away. This dagger to the back of Europe has to go away because Russia is a hostile nation full of crazy people. So what are the possible outcomes? And it doesn't really matter. I mean, there's a couple scenarios that could play out, and once Russia is economically defeated, once the money stops flowing, once negotiations begin, Kaliningrad could just deport everyone. You know, the population of Kaliningrad is 471,000. All of these people could just be told, you have to go back to mainland Russia, and then this territory could be split between Lithuania or Poland. Or if Belarus becomes a democracy and Belarus becomes, like a real country with real elections, maybe Belarus could absorb Kaliningrad because they're both Russian speaking. Or this is a crazy idea. When the war is over, Ukraine gets Kaliningrad. Ukraine is a bilingual country with Russian speakers. So these people could become Ukrainian citizens and then get political re-education. Like the Ukrainian language would have to start being taught to children in schools here, but Ukraine could basically take control of it. Or it doesn't matter. I mean, Kaliningrad can just be its own country. Luxembourg is 660,000 people. Malta is 550. I think these are the two smallest official countries in the EU, and Kaliningrad is not that much smaller. There's a combination of those scenarios that could play out, but this just isn't a top priority to be thinking about right now while people are dying. Next question. Hi, Jake. What has happened with different foreign soldiers captured by Ukraine and Russia? People from Nepal, Africa, China, Colombians, Cubans. Did their countries try to get them back? Were they part of any swap? Greetings from Argentina. This is a good question because Cossack Gundy is working on this issue. If you don't know who Cossack Gundy is, his real name is Aidan Aslan. He's a British citizen that was part of the Azov Brigade, and he was taken prisoner in the Azov Stall when Mariupol or when the fighters surrendered. He's the only foreign national that has been exchanged in a POW exchange. I don't know why Russia let him go, but the Russians are holding on to all the other foreigners that they capture on the battlefield. And Russia doesn't want their foreign fighters back. Ukraine has captured people from Africa and the Middle East fighting for the Russians, but they're not part of any official POW exchanges because Russia doesn't want them. And Russia doesn't want to give up their foreign fighters either. Cossack Gundy is trying to advocate for these foreigners who are in Russian POW camps. He wants to see them exchanged just like Ukrainian soldiers are being exchanged, but this is a political process, and the official governments of these foreign fighters should also get involved. For example, if somebody from Brazil was taken prisoner, then the president of Brazil should be asking Putin, can this guy be part of a POW exchange? We'll take him back to Brazil. I don't know. It's a mess, guys. Next question. Every pro-Ukrainian person, including myself, hopes that Russia will soon economically collapse so that this war can finally stop. But we also need to think about the issues we'll have to face after the collapse. If Russia collapses or falls into total anarchy with warlords or oligarchs, with no morals fighting for power, what will happen to all their nukes? Are there any plans from US NATO to try to secure the nukes if this happens? Your question is ironic, and I don't think you realize why. So you're saying, is anyone thinking about what will happen if Russia collapses? And yes, that was the entire philosophy of Joe Biden and Jake Sullivan. Support Ukraine enough so that Russia doesn't collapse, because the nightmare scenario is a Russian civil war in which feuding warlords all have nuclear weapons. Millions or tens of millions of people die in that scenario, which is why Joe Biden and Jake Sullivan never committed to overwhelming force and support for Ukraine. They were supporting Ukraine enough, hoping the Russians would just give up. The Russians would be deterred and try to end the war, which never happened. So your next question, are there any plans from US NATO to try to secure the nukes if Russia collapses? And no, because Trump does not make plans. Trump has no plan. Donald Trump, his entire presidency, is just winging it. He wakes up in the morning, he has a thought, he has a feeling, he tweets it out, that is now US policy, until he changes his mind the next day. So unfortunately, there is no plan. What will happen if Russia breaks up? I'm sure there's some independent think tanks doing analysis, but nobody in the White House cares, because everybody in the White House is a moron. So if Russia breaks up, yes, these regional governors, these regional warlords are going to be fighting over oil fields and diamond mines and gold mines and gas deposits, and they're all going to have nuclear weapons if they start fighting with each other. If this happens, this is like years in the future, yes, I would support special forces for the nuclear powers, France, the UK, and the United States, just going into Russia to secure nuclear material or nukes if we can. We're going to be bribing people. We're going to be chucking money at warlords saying, if you give us your nukes, we'll give you legitimacy, we'll give you humanitarian aid, we'll give you even funding. Just give us those nuclear weapons. And this happened in 1994. This was after the Soviet Union collapsed. Not many people know about something called Project Sapphire. But basically, there was 600 kilograms of weapons-grade uranium in a random warehouse in Kazakhstan. Somebody in Kazakhstan noticed this. It was tested, it was authenticated, and the US government couldn't get a hold of the Kremlin. Boris Yeltsin was not picking up the phone. I think Bill Clinton was president at this time. So the United States just sent in the military into Kazakhstan to secure this 600 pounds of weapons-grade uranium. I think we paid the government of Kazakhstan something for this, but this was fissile material that was supposed to go back to Russia like a year or two earlier. Kazakhstan gave up their nukes, and all those nukes had to go back to Russia. The other partner, and this is a terrifying scenario, is China. If Russia destabilizes and we have the risk of loose nukes, I don't see any other way. The Chinese military is going to have to go into Russia. Chinese ground forces are going to have to go into Russia to find and secure these nuclear weapons. And I think Europe and the United States is going to have to support this in the short term. The question is if Chinese troops set foot on Russian territory, does that territory then belong to China? And something tells me China is going to say yes. But we'll deal with China later. We have to worry about Russia today. These are not easy questions, guys. I'm doing my best here. Okay. If it is seen that Russia is wanting a ceasefire because their economy is near collapse, should Ukraine agree to it or let the collapse happen? To me, it might save Russia to have the ceasefire, whereas a collapse could force the troops to return to Russia, and Ukraine could regain vast amounts, if not all of their territory. I am guessing this discussion is occurring in the inner circle of the Ukrainian government. There are risks, but would the risks be any different from a Russia that comes back from the brink of collapse? The collapse would, of course, bring its own problems. The economic and demographic collapse of Russia is inevitable. It could be 30 years from now, it could be 20 years from now, it could be next year. We don't know, but the ball is already in motion. So your hypothetical that if an economic collapse seems imminent to the public, should Ukraine show mercy? And even if they did, it wouldn't stop it. The ball is in motion. The wealth fund of Russia has been depleted. Their international reputation and standing is completely shattered. Nobody trusts the Russians for anything. Nobody likes Russia. Russia has no future. So yes, your hypothetical, no, Ukraine should not show mercy, should not try to spare Russia a complete collapse. But similar to China, they're also in demographic collapse. Russia was struggling well before COVID. It's even worse now with the invasion and young people just fleeing the country. In addition, Russian women just aren't having kids. There's economic uncertainty, and culturally it's changing. The populations in Russia with the highest birth rates are not ethnic Russians. They're mostly Muslim or ethnic minorities, and Russia's a hard place to live in. It's a hard place to live in, and Putin's not making it any better. So this is the scenario I think that's going to play out. Additionally, concerning Russia's economy, I forget the quotes that Russia is not a country. Russia is a gas station masquerading as a country. I learned a new term called KGB capitalism. This is in the book Putin's People by Catherine Belton. I'm reading it now. And Russia doesn't really have any savvy business leaders. The people that Putin has put in charge of all of these state monopolies or strategic companies, these are not the best and brightest people. Putin picks them for their loyalty to Putin. So Russia doesn't have the best and brightest leading their largest companies. They all have kleptocrats in charge of everything. And when the ship starts to sink, these guys are going to flee like rats. They're going to try and get all of their assets, as much as they can, out of the country, and they'll happily live out the rest of their days in Dubai or Istanbul or Beijing or wherever. A separate question, if I may. What do you think of Trump's evident cognitive decline? As someone with experience in neuropsychology, I don't think it's Alzheimer's, but it may be some other form, such as frontal temporal dementia. His last couple appearances have been disasters. Trump's father did die of Alzheimer's, so there is a genetic component that could be there. But this is the guy. He's 79 years old. This is a picture of my president today. And he has this stupid hair, because he takes Propecia or some kind of hair-growing hormone. And he puts on this poop brown-orange makeup every single day, because, oh God. Trump's cognitive decline is apparent just from when the election was in November. So the election in November was 8 or 9 months ago. And you can compare two clips of him talking from just 9 months ago and today. He is rapidly aging. Being president, especially the way he operates, it's stressful. It's demanding. This guy is traveling all over the world. He flies to Mar-a-Lago every weekend just to golf, when he should be taking it easy, maybe staying in, not getting on the helipad. We are going to watch this man slowly die in office over the next 3.5 years. Physically, mentally, he is not going to make it to the next presidential election. We are going to have some kind of national moment in which he's just gonna poop himself in front of the camera, and then he'll have to start wearing diapers or something stupid. Like, when this happens, the MAGA cult, the MAGA base, is just gonna say this is normal. First of all, his ear was not shot off. I don't know what caused his ear to bleed, that failed assassination attempt, but his entire ear is still there. But Trump, for a week, wore this bandage on his ear, and then all of his supporters started wearing bandages on their ears. Because it's a fucking cult. So when Trump starts to cognitively decline, worse than today, like he doesn't even know where he is, he can't remember anyone's name, he is clearly mentally gone. They're never going to acknowledge it. They're just going to say he's a genius. If the president has to wear diapers because he poops himself in public, these psychopaths are going to start wearing diapers in public, and they're going to defecate themselves to show support for their chosen leader. You guys think I'm joking? Go ahead and bookmark this video. Over the next 3.5 years, we're going to see some disgusting and stupid shit from this decrepit, insane, dying individual who's in charge of 5,500 nuclear weapons. God, that was not a good way to end the video, guys. That did not feel good at all. Okay, I'm just going to stop the video here. I was going to continue talking and try and tie some things together, but there's really no point. The next 3 years are going to be chaos. There's no way to avoid it. But that doesn't mean you should stop being a good person. That doesn't mean you should stop caring about what is right. Continue supporting human rights, continue supporting democracy, continue supporting Ukraine. If all of the decent people of the world seize this opportunity to raise awareness about the rise of autocracy, the rise of these kleptocratic countries who have infected our democracies, who are trying to destabilize us. This potentially is the moment we needed to finally wake up and refresh our own democratic institutions, to make them stronger, to make them better, to remind ourselves, what's the purpose of democracy? Why do we even have it? Why do we prefer it to the alternatives being offered by very dangerous men? So I'm never going to stop. I'm never going to shut up. And I really appreciate you guys sticking it out with me. I'm not alone, because I have you guys. And you're not alone either, because I'm not going anywhere. If you made it this far in the video, you're a super fan. Thank you so much. Give this video a like. Next update video is coming on Sunday. Take care, everyone.